The danger is to please an immediate public.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Artist Provocateur. I'm Josephat and today we're talking about two artists whose work take on very different shapes. Sometimes it's as small as a seed and sometimes it can be as big as an island. We're talking about Weiwei and Christo. Weiwei is a contemporary artist and activist. He grew up in the northwest end of China and he spent some rough first years due to his father's exile. He is, as an activist, always been very critical of the Chinese government's stand on human rights and democracy. He's investigated some cover-ups and some government corruption through his pieces. Ai Weiwei's personal political convictions and his personal poetry is depicted heavily on his work. He makes use of Chinese art forms, of traditional Chinese art forms to comment on the Chinese political and social issues. He's largely influenced by artists like Marcel Duchamp, Andy Warhol and Jasper Jones. He actually started his career by modifying ready-mades and creating conceptual art. In 1958, Ai's family was sent to a labor camp. He was there for 16 years until the death of Mao Zedong and the end of the Cultural Revolution. And at that point, the family was finally able to return to Beijing. Ai Weiwei's long been a thorn in the Chinese government's side. But in 2011, he was actually detained. He was arrested at the Beijing International Airport for supposed economic crimes, although they were never fully disclosed. He was detained for 81 days without a formal charge. His passport was removed. He was, of course, unable to communicate with anybody. And after he was finally released, he was forbidden from traveling outside the country, and he was heavily monitored. Human rights experts see his arrest as part of a wider crackdown against dissidents, lawyers, and protesters by the Chinese government, that so many of them either arrested or disappearing. Ai Weiwei emerged from his arrest a vital instigator against the Chinese government, a very vocal commentator, and an architect of Chinese modernism. In 2008, 10 days after the 8.0 magnitude earthquake that destroyed the Sichuan province, Ai Weiwei led a team to survey and film the post-quake conditions in various disaster zones. In response to the government's lack of transparency in revealing names of the students who died in the earthquake due to substandard school campus constructions, Ai said, and I quote, "We will seek out the names of each departed child and we will remember them." As of 2009, the list had accumulated 4,851 names. I published the collection of names in his website and a number of other publications that were promptly closed and censored by the Chinese government. Ai Weiwei is definitely no stranger to controversy, and in 1995 came one of his first most controversial pieces, dropping a Han Dynasty urn. This is a series of 3 pictures that show a performance by Ai Weiwei in which he is holding a 2,000-year-old Han Dynasty vase, almost invaluable piece of an antique, and he's dropping it on purpose, and he's documenting the process of the urn falling down and just shattering into pieces. He is very clearly talking about heritage here, right? He's talking about his own heritage. He's also reflecting on the words of Mao Zedong that during the Cultural Revolution said that you cannot create a new society without destroying the previous one. So he's really putting that concept to the test. He's also exploring concepts of destruction and creation. He is turning the destruction itself in an act of creation. So how ethical was it for Ai Weiwei to destroy this historical artifact is something that's been largely debated. Some people see this work as an attempt of Ai to collaborate with the great masters of the past, of taking this piece that was created 2,000 years ago and completing it in a sense, to turn it into a new piece. But for others, of course, this is misappropriation of other people's work. Needless to say, this work enraged a lot of people. Antiques collectors, historical societies, heritage groups, they all were very much against the idea of the destruction of this artifact. But in a sense, Ai is also sending us a message through this destruction, through this performance. He is also asking us to reflect on how little we really value artwork, to the point that it becomes more valuable once it's destroyed. Because he has destroyed this piece, and this is a very interesting paradox, because he's destroyed this piece, the pictures, the new work that he's created, in a sense, becomes more valuable than the vase itself. Because the vase no longer has a value, the new work has surpassed the old work in its value, both perceived and monetary. From 2008 to 2012, he presented Straight, which is a series of steel reinforcements that were recovered from the Sichuan earthquake, and they were straightened and then displayed as an installation. Just as controversial was Ai's involvement with the project of the bird's nest. You see, he was commissioned as the artistic consultant for design for the Beijing National Stadium for the 2008 Summer Olympics. And he accepted. He actually was part of this project in his own words, because he loves design. But it was very unusual for him to be working on a commission by the Chinese government. In 2010 in London, he presented Sunflower Seeds. It consists of 100 million handmade and painted porcelain sunflower seeds. The original installation had the seeds just spread across the floor. They weighed about 10 metric tons, and they were made over 2.5 years by 1,600 Jingdeshan artisans in a city where porcelain has been made for Chinese rulers for thousands of years. They are made in the traditional method, which is a 30-stage process. The sculpture refers to Chairman Mao's rule and the Chinese Communist Party. The mass of the seeds represent that together the people of China can step up and overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. The seeds also refer to what we know now to be China's mass automated processes. And by calling attention, by memorializing a labor-intensive process, he is asking us to reflect on this ancient techniques of the way that traditional Chinese artifacts were made in comparison to what we have now, this hyper-simplified processes. In 2014, he created Coca-Cola vase, in which he took a hand style urn and he brushed over with a Coca-Cola logo. And again, he's very clearly calling attention to consumerism and mass production. Later that year, he presented Trace. Trace is a series of 176 2D portraits made in Lego that are set on a large floor. The portraits are of various political prisoners and prisoners of conscience. The original installation was actually set in Alcatraz prison in San Francisco. In 2017, commenting on the Syrian refugee crisis, he created Law of the Journey. It's an all-black, 230-foot-long inflatable boat that carries 258 faceless refugee figures. Then in 2020, he produced Coronation. Coronation is a documentary about the impact the COVID-19 crisis has had on Wuhan, China. It shows the response both from the citizens and the government. Needless to say, this documentary holds the Chinese government in a very poor light. And he's said, Ai Weiwei has said that he's tried to show this documentary in a number of festivals, including the New York Film Festival, the Venice Film Festival, the Toronto International Film Festival, and they all have declined to show the project. He's also pitched the idea to Amazon and to Netflix, and they both rejected the project. Ai Weiwei himself has said that the reason why all these festivals and platforms have rejected the project is because of the invisible pressure that the Chinese markets are exerting on them. Christo Vladimirov Javacheff and Jeanne-Claude Denat de Guillebon, also known as Christo and Jeanne-Claude, were two conceptual artists. They are very well known for their site-specific huge pieces. They usually involve large landmarks and landscape elements wrapped in fabric. Christo and Jeanne-Claude's pieces often take decades to create. They were all temporary, and they required the collaboration of hundreds of people, government officials, judges, environmental groups, local residents, engineers, workers, a lot of people that were not very interested in seeing their lives disrupted by the visions of this weird guy who could barely speak English. But Christo always thought of this negotiation as being part of the piece. He always thought that communicating with people and convincing them to let him do his huge projects was part of the process of the creation of the piece. Christo and Jeanne-Claude always said that their projects did not have a deeper meaning other than the immediate aesthetic impact. The purpose of their pieces, according to them, was only to create joy, beauty, and to see familiar things in an unexpected way. Christo created epic-scale environmental pieces, such as stringing a giant curtain across a mountain range in Colorado, or wrapping the Reichstag in Berlin in plastic, or just setting a bunch of saffron zigzagging curtains in Central Park. Christo took painting and drawing lessons as a child. He later went on to study fine arts at the Fine Arts Academy in Sofia, Bulgaria, while the country was still under communist regime. One of his assignments later, when he graduated and he was working for the Communist Party, was to tell the farmers how to arrange their haystacks and their tractors along the route to show a bustling and prosperous community. He went on to confess later on, many years later, that was one of the first assignments that gave him the idea of experimenting with large-scale environmental pieces. It was also a learning experience for him on how to deal with people and convince them to do what he wanted them to do. In '61, as part of his first solo show, he stacked oil drums and he covered a car in fabric and twine. He added some furniture and objects in the dock that he also wrapped in fabric and twine, and he called them dockside packages. A lot of people see in this first exhibit what would be the signs of the style that would dominate his career. While his work is, in his own words, only meant to inspire joy and change the perspective of familiar things, a lot of people see in Christo's work critique on packaging and advertising in late capitalist societies. In '72, he presented Valley Curtain. For it, he strung orange nylon fabric along steel cables over a narrow pass in Rifle, Colorado. There was a large semicircular opening that allowed cars on the highway to pass through. A couple days later, fierce winds just ripped the fabric to shreds, and Christo just shrugged it off. And he said, and I quote, "I as an artist have done what I set out to do. That the curtain no longer exists only makes it more interesting." A work this size doesn't just require a lot of planning and engineering. It also requires a lot of economical muscle. And it requires a whole economical structure to put it together. During Valley Curtain, Christo and his lawyer actually devised the mechanism that would later be used for his subsequent pieces. For each project, they created a corporation, and Jeanne-Claude was the head of the corporation, and Christo was as a salaried worker. Financing for the projects came from the sale of his models and his sketches, but he never accepted any grants or public money. Then when the piece was taken down, the corporation dissolved itself, having earned zero profit. After Valley Curtain, during the 80s and the 90s, Christo became a superstar. In 83, he presented Surrounded Islands. In it, he dressed 11 islands in Biscayne Bay in South Florida in flamingo pink polypropylene skirts and made them look like floating tropical flowers. In 85, he wrapped the Pont Neuf in Paris. This is a project that took decades of stalling by bureaucracy, but it was a great triumph when it was finally presented. Even more difficult politically was Christo's plan to wrap the Reichstag. This project was first presented in 1971. That's when the first sketch actually was created. But he saw nothing but resistance from the West Germany officials. It was not until the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 that the project actually started gaining some momentum, and it was finally finished in 1995. Between Pont Neuf and the Reichstag projects, Christo and Jeanne-Claude placed 1,760 yellow umbrellas north of Los Angeles and 1,340 blue umbrellas on a hillside near Ibaraki in Japan. They called this piece The Umbrellas, Japan, USA. And sadly, it actually came to a halt when one of the umbrellas in Japan came on board and killed a woman, injuring a few other people. So Christo and Jeanne-Claude ordered the umbrellas to be taken down on both countries immediately. In 2016, he completed The Floating Piers, a piece that, according to the artist, fulfilled his dream of walking on water. The floating piers use nearly 2 miles of saffron fabric to create pedestrian walkways that connect two small islands in Lake Iseo. Christo passed away in May 2020. At the moment of his death, he had this big project on hold. He wanted to wrap the Arc de Triomphe in Paris in 25,000 meters of blue silver fabric and 7,000 meters of red rope. The project actually will be completed in 2021, in September 2021, according to a statement released after Christo's death. The public loved Christo. The art critics, not so much. They give some really mixed reviews. Some theorists believe that it's because his work was so accessible, because it was so there for you to appreciate. You didn't have to go to a gallery, you didn't have to go to a museum. It wasn't auctioned, at this exclusive place. So it was there for everybody to enjoy, and that turns this into something a little too popular for some art critics to consider serious art. Whether they loved him or hate him, both sides thought of him as an unclassifiable figure in the art pantheon. The artist Saul Steinberg, a good friend of Christo, said, and I quote, "He not only invented himself, he invented his art, and even more amazing, he invented his public." All right, here are 5 questions to get us started on our conversation about Ai Weiwei and Christo. Number 1, should artists denounce oppression, even at the cost of their own lives? Number 2, can government-censored art still be considered personal? Number 3, what can the destruction of a historical piece say about our present? Number 4, if art pursues no further meaning than the aesthetic experience, is it still art? And finally, number 5, is traditional craftsmanship still a valid medium for contemporary art? Alright guys, that's the end of our video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to leave your comments below, and I will see you next time.